give or take?
I think we're 10. 1 second.
10.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, 10, I think.
Right. Okay, and then so Tommaso, just in terms of the recording of this, what I might do that, I mean, at any time, if you want to jump in and ask a question or raise a hand, then I'll look for that. So you say, oh, you said this, it'd be interesting to do this. So let's just have it not just like a 15-minute spiel, but feel free to jump in at any time. And just to say in the chat, I don't think the chat box works. Does it work? I think it does work. So I can just drop in some links in there. If there's things I think are good for you to click on and jump into as well. So what I'll do is I'll do that. So maybe you've started recording, so we can pretend this is the start now. So I'll say, hi, my name's Sam Barrat. I work for Youth Environment. I'm based in Nairobi. It's lovely to be here talking with you, albeit not face to face, but on Teams. So what I'll do is I'll just talk about a few things that I'll hope will be interesting, but then the Q&A at the end I think will be where it gets slightly more. So I've worked at the United Nations for 4-ish years. My background is I used to work at Oxfam. I've worked for Avaz as the communications director. I've done some various things with Gordon Brown in politics around education as well. And I also went to Liverpool University as a politics student. And so I think for me, the UN has always been an opportunity for me to test where you can have the greatest influence in different institutions within the world, and how, when you pull different levers, what reaction you can generate. The role of the UN is to have like a normative approach to set policies, work with member states, heads of governments about what they're trying to do, and just think about how we keep the environment under review. But what's also interesting about UNEP is it's a relatively youngish UN entity. It's only 50 years old. It's based in Nairobi, where we're one of the few UN headquartered in the south. And we've just come up with a new kind of work plan where we work on 3 things, which is nature, pollution, and then the other one is climate change. UNFCCC kind of runs all the COP processes on climate change, and that came out of UNEP. So they run the Intergovernmental Conference of the Parties, but we also have a wider program on climate change as well. I think the work that we do ranges from the Ozone Secretariat, kind of ran the process that led to the healing of the ozone layer. All the work we've done on transport led to lead being taken out of petrol years ago. And new guidelines around electrification of vehicles is another thing we're pushing on. Marine litter is a big focus of UNEP, so we did a lot of work around how we reduce plastic pollution, both upstream and downstream. And when it comes to nature, we run the RED process, which is all about restoration of landscapes. So we work with governments about how do we put trees back where they should be and conserve what we have left. So UNEP is this big kind of environmental beast, but it's only 1,000 staff. So we don't really do a lot of programmatic work. And there's a really good podcast I'll share with you, which is a link on the history of the UN, which is the UN is best at creating ideas, either to validate them or to create new ones that then get turned into policy by others. Sometimes it's at its worst is when it tries to program work, when others may be better placed to do that at ground level. I don't think that's true for humanitarian. So I think we're at our best when it comes to big ideas. In my job at UNEP, I run our Youth Education and Advocacy program. So I used to be Chief of Advocacy and run all our different programs on a range of things. What we work on is formal and non-formal education. So for formal education, we work with universities to help them to decarbonise. So we're running a project called Race to Zero, which is for COP26 to get universities to commit to be net zero as soon as possible. And we've got about 600 universities on board. We've also worked with a behavioural insights team that's based in London on something called the Little Book of Green Nudges to try and get campuses to be not just a place for learning outcomes, but to think about how you change mindsets around what do you eat, how do you travel, what do you do, so that those as you grow older become habits you take forward in life. So we've done 40 different nudges, and we've got somewhere in the range of about 300 universities that are going to be piloting the deployment of nudges on campus. What else are we doing? We're working with UNESCO to come up with recommendations on what should climate curricula look like for governments, so they can think about how they ship curricula. And so we talk to environment ministers, they talk to education ministers, and how do we put the two together? And we also set up new green university networks. We're starting one in Africa, we're doing one in India, we're supporting one in Kenya, to try and get universities to think about how do they share best practice and work as collectives to really kind of shift the needle on things. So we do a lot of work with networks of networks. So EAUC in the UK, ASHE in the US, SIGAN in China, ASCN in Asia Pacific, to get these networks of universities to think about how do they best advise their networks and best practice. But in addition to that, we also work on non-formal education, because I think that you can't do everything inside a classroom or a lecture hall. And so we work with the video gaming industry, and today we've just launched our Playing for the Planet Impact Report. We work with 30 fairly large video gaming companies to get them to commit to decarbonise and put green activations in games. That's something we've been working on, and I'll just drop the link in the chat so you can just see what that's about. We also work with the Scouts and the Girl Guides, who reach some in the region of 70 million youth, and to help them think about how do they. So I was a Scout, and I think the Scouts come from the trees. They spend their time in the forests. They get out of their parents' hair. And I think that unless the Scouts and the Girl Guides fight for nature, there'll be nothing left for them to return to. So I think with the Scouts and the Girl Guides, we've done a program called Tide Turners to get them to work on plastics, which about 300,000 kids have got involved in. But we've now set up a new concept called Earth Tribe with the Scouts to try and put all their environmental education curricula online. So, and then we also work with sports. So we work with the Olympics to try and get them to go sustainable. So there's a whole thing for Japan we're doing, and various things. So my team is only 10 people, so we're quite small. But what we look to do is co-create partnerships with other entities and see what they can do. And one thing I think is great is to say things like, I've got this idea, I don't think it could work, but maybe we could pull this off. And so the way I try and secure outcomes is not having hard ownership around the project, but to get people to hold hands together so they see them as being partly responsible for its success, as opposed to you just implementing it on your own. So, and I think for me, there is real magic when you work with others in a way that gets them to think about their agency and their power. And the UN can just sit behind them and just say, this is a great idea. We know you can do it. So we're going to step back and we can help whenever you need us to. So for me, it's not so much the what you do, but it's the how that you do it that matters. Because I think for me, the UN is very hard rational, like here are some statistics, just kind of eat them and then good things will happen, as opposed to if you connect to the heart and inspire people about possibility, that's when you unlock things. So for me, the way that I think about our work is more about systems change. So what can we do with the sector and pick them up and put them down? So the video gaming industry hadn't really thought about sustainability, so that was a new concept and project. How can you touch things that feel like they've got friction or they're difficult to do? So there's always a big thing for me about doing either what people don't expect you to do, so it then feels more curious, or to find other ways of getting people to be inspired by breaking new ground. So I think that's important for me. But then the other thing is scale. There's no point doing a project if it's got concrete around it. It needs to be able to be free to grow. And so I'm always thinking about how things can be exponential and where they could go next. So that's kind of what we do, and that's kind of where I work. Any questions on that? No? I bet there are. Gabriella.
Yeah, it's quite interesting when you talked about the decarbonizing university campuses, because last year our school, which is the School of Anthropology and Conservation, was the first to declare a climate emergency and try to work towards like decarbonizing our schools, so not the whole university. So I was just wondering, how is there a method to like join the scheme you were talking about, to incite maybe more schools in our university to do the same, because for now it's only the School of Anthropology and Conservation which is concerned, which is unfortunate.
Yes, there is. So I'm just going to share with you a link about what we're doing with Second Nature, to share with you how we're trying to get higher ed to shift. So I'll just drop that in the chat, but I think for me, it's, sorry, I'll try and not get distracted. When it comes to making that commitment to go to net zero, or to think about how do you rinse out all of your, all of the energy that you have within the system. I think some people think it's kind of really hard, and it is, but there's a lot of really good practice out there in the world that you could follow. So what we've done is work with Second Nature and EAC with some guidelines about what you could do on a campus. And I think a lot of people have already done this. The only thing with higher education is I do think that it's very sclerotic in terms of the pace that it works. And I think it outbeats UN on bureaucracy some of the time. So it's like, man, really, are we going to work that slowly? So, but I think it's a fear-based mindset about getting it wrong, rather than an open mindset about trying stuff, making mistakes, and just iterating that. And I feel like higher education is moving. And so the way I think about it is maybe 3 different domains. What you can do as an institution, I just think, is just common sense, best practice, and everyone should just do it. It's just a box to tick. But I think where it gets more interesting is like, how do you deploy your research so it's fixing real world problems? So it's more academic rather than just academic. So how can you deploy your research outcomes to be aligned and honed to really kind of fixing some of the sustainability challenges that we face? And the other thought that we have around this is the mindsets thing, the little book of green nudges that we've shared with you. We're also exploring an idea around endowments. In Kenya, the university down the road, Strathmore, has put a 600 kilowatt solar array on top of its roof. But we think there's an interesting north-south collaboration about how do you lock endowments to help developing country universities go to net zero by creating like green bonds that they could then access to be able to secure money that they would repay over, say, a 5 to 10 year period that allow them to come off grid with a power purchase agreement. But then in exchange for that credit, they could then secure maybe other commitments around curriculum change, community engagement, whatever it might be. So I think making the commitment around decarbonisation, I think there's so many things that I could point your way to look at for University of Kent and others to do. I think there's going beyond that. I do think mindset is important, but the other one is kind of like north-south collaboration as well. So Gabrielle, I can send you a few bits and pieces, and I'll put that in the chat so you can take a look at it. But good question. Did that make sense? Did I answer your question, or did I ramble on? No.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Yeah, I'm sure the resources would be helpful for us.
Right. Okay. Tommaso.
Yeah, I was wondering if you could talk a little more about, you mentioned that sort of learning goes both inside and outside of the classroom. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about how that happens in practice and how you also do it so it's hand in hand, and what is learned in the classroom or in the lecture hall then also applies outside of it.
So the insight around this is based around the value that children get when they spend time in nature in terms of the appreciation, mental health dividends, and the way they see nature, particularly in a particularly urban life, as being othered as opposed to connected to you. So I feel like the role that the Scouts and the Girl Guides play about getting people out into the environment is critical. And reading Isabel Hardman's book, The Natural Health Service, gives you a real insight about the value that nature plays for us, just as on so many different levels. So the insight I had on that was, if it's just an academic exercise about learning about the importance of nature, I don't think that gives the reverence and the resonance about the value of nature if you spend time in it. So that's why I think the Girl Guides and the Scouts are important, because they get people out into nature so they can just see the purpose of it. The other thing is also just about what we have right now is an attention economy, and video gaming is winning the attention economy hands down. And so the more we can think about how do we redeploy the message, it's not just like a teacher sharing information with you for you to then either choose to use or ignore, but the reinforcement of that through different touch points, I think, is important. So, I mean, it's a basic marketing principle that if you get to people 7 times, you're more likely able to get them to think differently about something. And so the more that you have different touch points that can work it through, the more it can lead to change. There's something slightly more scientific than that I can share with you about how we've ended up with this process. But I feel like if we purely pursue an academic channel for this program, I don't think we'll win. And I think having a hybrid approach that thinks about what do people love, what messages they listen to, who do they respect, I think that's important as well. And so that's why we thought about it in that way. Cool. Tommaso, did that answer your question?
Yeah, that was brilliant. Thank you.
Right. So, Emily, I was going to kick on a bit now about what could you do? So maybe what would be interesting to hear about, what are you already doing? Like, I think Gabriella alluded to this before about what you've done in your anthropological faculty. So maybe if you want to just share with me, I know it's 2 different communities, so it's not like there's not one answer, there might be 2, and there might be individual rather than kind of the collective. But it'd be really, maybe if you just give me, say, 2 minutes of just hearing from you about where you're at, and then maybe that's helpful for me to respond to that, and then we can take it from there.
Okay, so well, there are like on campus there are quite a few groups. So there's like the ECS, which is the one hosting this event, which does a lot of like kind of underground work, so like beach cleans, reintroduction of like hedgehogs, a lot of like events such as this one as well to raise awareness about the environment. But there's also like societies like the anthropology society, like the Anthropology and Conservation Society, which is the school's society, which does a lot more things in collaboration with the university, I think. There's the Sustainability Network, of which I'm also a part, which is responsible for pushing policies in the union. And so, for example, right now we're trying to push towards reintroducing a role in our union, which was cancelled a few years ago. About like having someone who is full-time employed to represent the sustainability concerns of students at university, to kind of like encourage the whole of the university to move into a more sustainable way. But right now we do not have that role anymore. So it's kind of like we've got a team of 2 people that are responsible for the entire university of the sustainability of our campus. And although Kent is like a really green campus, that is not enough to kind of like show the desire that there is at our university to like educate and respond to environmental like problems. Then we're also in collaboration and in contact with like Canterbury-based, so Canterbury is the town next to the University of Kent. So Canterbury-based like projects, because there that we've got like Greenpeace, there's Extinction Rebellion, and there's also a group called Climate Change Action Program, and Canterbury Climate Action Program, and basically some of our lecturers are involved in that as well. And they work on monitoring what Canterbury itself is doing for university. And it's all about linking all these groups together. But as of now, we're not very closely linked. And it's kind of like we're all doing our projects all in our corner, but we don't have one overall kind of leadership that is able to really break through and push forward. So that is one of the questions that I had for you, which is how can we kind of link up all these individual, very isolated, to like, which I find is quite typical of environmental action in other places where I've been engaged. And sorry, I don't know if someone wanted to talk there. Yeah, sorry. And so yes, this is kind of like where we're at, and where we want to go is how can we use our student voice to push things even further, and in what direction should we go to kind of coordinate with the outer world and what's happening beyond Canterbury and Kent.
Okay. Does anyone else want to build on that? No?
Yeah.
Go ahead. Brianna,
Yeah.
go ahead.
I just a thought. I also feel like we always, not the same people, but it's always a similar group of people that come to our events, that participate in the things we do, and are active within the, I guess, environmental activism. But it's hard to reach beyond, I feel, like people that are not necessarily directly concerned. So I feel like that would be an important step to move forward, is to reach a bigger audience. Basically what Emily was saying. Yeah.
Okay. So just a question, which is, so is the challenge that you're trying to address lots of fragmented initiatives, mixture of priorities? So hedgehogs are seen as important as other things, but people aren't kind of working. So is the challenge one of coordination and collaboration? Is the challenge one of prioritization? Or is the challenge something else?
So it's kind of like everything, but I'm not sure I'm too concerned about prioritization, because the fact that there are so many types of group kind of enables everyone to kind of focus on their own thing. But it's more the fact that there's like the coordination, because all actions are very, very isolated here, and just kind of like what we should do and what we should ask of our university, because we now know how to ask things of our universities, but now it's kind of like knowing what we should insist on.
Yeah. Okay. So I think there's a range of different ideas, and this is just in no, like a set of reflections. Like the University of Kent, I think, particularly in Canterbury, I mean, beautiful city surrounded by amazing countryside, interesting kind of different political dynamics, both in terms of the recent election and then outside of it in the villages as well. So a blend of different perspectives, I'm sure. I mean, it feels like setting a vision for where does Canterbury want to go, and where does the University of Kent want to go in kind of in harness with that would be quite interesting. So what is the vision for the university and the city and the county about what it's trying to achieve, and how can the university underwrite that? How can the hugely migratory population of students play a role, so they're seen as assets to unlock challenges within the city or within the county, as opposed to people that aren't from around here, if you like. So how can you kind of bridge that? It might be looking at what the university's already committed to, and maybe where the region is trying to go, particularly just building on the heritage of Kent, which is kind of, it's got this folksy charm of hops, but coast, and a lot of different environmental kind of domains to it, if you like. And it might be to say, I feel like the best way of working out what you do want to do is listen first and tell second. And so if you were to ask the students of University of Kent, what is the most important thing for you that you think we should prioritise? Parallel that with what do the citizens of Kent prioritise as well, and say, okay, this is interesting. So students want this, constituents or people want this. Is there an overlap, or is there any dissonance there? Then you have that proxy indicator about what people want you to do. And then I think it would be interesting to think about, once you've got that insight, about how do you use that to validate and ask to say, we're here, but we want to get here. And then it just strengthens your cause. So for me, when I think about when you're trying to make different constituencies think about how they collaborate to have one set of, say, 3 to 5 asks that are really important you'd like to see happen, and then you can say that would range from I don't know, car-free city to whatever it might be, then you can work off the back of that. We've done a project called Count Us In, just working through a range of different scientific studies about what are the most useful things that any individual can do to reduce their individual carbon footprint. And it is basically 4 things. It's kind of what you eat, how you power your house, how you travel, and sorry, the one other one is, actually it's just those 3. Yeah, it's those 3, and I can send you the document on that. And maybe what you could do is look at what are the most important things that we could do, and then just validate that against the science, and just say, okay, people want this, we think we should do this. Let's come up with like a 2, 3, 5-year plan to try and move that agenda forward. So I would be thinking quite big about like what pre-exists where there's commitments that either the county, the MP, or the Vice Chancellor have made about what they want their locality or university to become. Just see if that's moving or not moving. Then if you work against pre-stated commitments and then put power against them, then that can just move things further forward, rather than just creating stuff and saying, well, we want to do this, this, or this. So I think maybe this is a horrific answer, but maybe because listening sounds quite complex, it's like, God, where do I even start with that? But there's a way of polling that's relatively easy just to get insight around it. I can share with you some data that may or may not be useful, but then it's just creating an open space where you bring the different people together to say, look, this is where we're at, this is what I think we need to do, how could we make this happen, and this is what we can bring to support this. And then it's more of a deeper theory of change about how you can move those different issues more powerfully forward across the different communities in the locality. So there's just some ideas off the top of my head.
So I don't know if anyone else has any questions, but to follow up on that, it's kind of like from what we've seen from the meetings we've had, so across students and constituents, so because there are quite a lot of groups that are trying to push forward for the environmental for more environmental like norms and all of that in Canterbury and in the University of Kent. The problem is more that our voice is not being heard because we're too scattered. But this is my analysis, so I don't really know how accurate that is. But from what I've seen around me, it's not so much that there isn't like will for it. It's more that there is an inability to push it forward, to kind of like work together towards like making it clear that we want this thing. So for example, the environment team of the university is going to say, okay, we should do this, this, and this, but the university will turn around and be like, but are you sure this is what students want? And students, which are us, would be like, yes, but because we're being asked through 2 different channels, we can't push forward that everyone wants that.
Yeah, maybe make it somebody else's problem to solve for you. That's another good way of dealing with problems. So if you were to say to somebody in the Vice Chancellor's office, we would really like to see whether we could come up with bringing all the different groups together to convene and just work out what the priorities are. Here is something that we could send in advance just to get the consensus. And then we could understand what are the opportunities, what do people think is important, and what can we do together. And if you could help host that and just say, this is important, you're keen to hear, then maybe that's a way of unlocking that problem. So it's quite hard for you to use your power and your agency to get to that solution, but it's much easier for them to do it from their position to say, we'd be keen to try and work that through. So maybe that's a way of you working with, say, 2 or 3 other groups. And then it sounds it's quite kind of intriguing, which is we're all trying to achieve the same thing, but we're finding it hard to get to that outcome. And it's bizarre that we're approaching you with this problem, given that we're all, in theory, should be able to solve this ourselves. But if you could help give us a space to work it through and show that you would value what we have to say, then we'd really appreciate it. So in a way, I think vulnerable leadership to say, we don't have all the right answers, but we want to help make the thing better, can maybe another interesting way of just approaching people in power to get them to often their benevolent approach to make things happen. But maybe, Emily, that's just nonsense, but I would respond to that, but maybe that wouldn't be helpful in your environment. Marcel?
I think that's also very interesting when talking about Canterbury and not just the university, because it seems like the problem that Emily is alluding to is that there's sort of all of this energy and this want for activism and change, but just sort of either not the organizational structure or not the toolkit for that to happen, both at the university and in Canterbury. So I mean, I'm also sort of wondering how you talked briefly before about how the university and students at the university can sort of be community leaders in Canterbury. I'm sort of wondering if you could elaborate on that a little bit more, and just sort of like the specific role that we can take on, to sort of be leaders in Canterbury, or even just to help out and help.
Yes. There's no one answer to this, because I think the biggest barrier is fear, and the fear of not being good enough. When anyone listen to me, surely somebody else can do this. Why do I need to get involved? And I think the biggest barrier that we all face is like, am I good enough? And should I be that person to take this on? It's interesting around organising. My experience of universities, the house we have back in the UK when we're there is in Oxford. And Oxford is a high-walled institution that most people that live there have kind of appreciation for the prettiness of the place, but don't really have any other engagement beyond that in Oxford. So I think in a way I would say, I mean, isn't the NUS a natural organising entity that you can work within, or is that different? Because I also know there's lots of student politics around status and prestige and roles and responsibilities, and they can be held in a slightly heavy way, perhaps. So I think my answer to your question was, don't let fear paralyse you. Work with people that are aligned, mind-melded, but also humble and vulnerable about what does leadership mean to them, that you can work with in a really kind of collegiate way. But focus on the problems that really matter. So just say, okay, let's really try and fix this one problem. And maybe if you fix one problem, it then can open up possibilities on other problems like 2 and 3. So once you kind of show progress and impact on one thing, then you can pick up others. So it could be for Canterbury, you choose something kind of small, but that shows your agency that you can make a difference on. I think working within institutions and saying, we are proud to be students of the University of Kent, but we think we're not punching hard enough in terms of the difference that we can make for the city. And we would like to work with your office to see what we could do to make a difference. And we'd like to bridge out into the community to see how we could help the people of this postcode, but also students, to really kind of think about how we can make a difference. And so for me, I would say there's probably 3 things. One is overcome your own fear. One is form a tribe and work out how you want to work on different objectives, but try and get humility, vulnerability, and just mind meld on priorities, and just kind of leave your egos outside the front door. And then just work with the office of the university to see how you could then maybe collaborate with them and to support their objectives as well. Because I'm sure if I was to Google now University of Kent Sustainability, they would have a bunch of things they're trying to do. Whether they're doing it or not is another question, but maybe unpicking that kind of mindset, which is I want to control the outcome and I don't trust other people to do this because they'll just get in my way, is often how strategies are written. But maybe if you were to say, we want to unpick your fingers on this and work with you hand in hand to see what we could do, then that might open up different things. So again, I could be not giving you the best advice because I don't know the context that well, but there's some thoughts. Okay. Emily, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, it's just, again, a follow-up question. It's just so basically this morning, for example, I had a meeting with the sustainability team of like the University of Kent, so this might be able to provide a bit of context in which we were kind of discussing how to push this kind of thing forward. But the main problem that seemed to come was not so much that the ideas are not there, but it's more that they like the plans that are being put forward are not being adopted by the university because of like budget restrictions and priorities, and that they're not recognizing kind of like they're not seeing proof of like student engagement in that direction, whereas like there are literally like close to 10 groups of students that are getting active and like that are growing interest for that. So
oh, okay, interesting. Well, I mean, I might be about to ask you to suck an egg with this, but just in terms of strategy, because this feels like it's more of a strategy question rather than anything else. It feels like, I mean, do you know what the problem is that you're trying to solve? Are you trying to solve lots of problems all at the same time and they're all competing for oxygen? It sounds like maybe that's a hard question to ask, but maybe the answer is just focus on one problem. And so I'm going to try and show you my whiteboard here. Can you see this? And this is, I'm sure there's a better way using technology. But I always just figure out, like, there's often one person that you're trying to influence, and so that's a person, or it could be a problem. And there's different ways that you can get through to this person. First of all, you need to work out what is their incentives. So what do they care about? What is important to them? You need to then think through who are in their circle of friends. So you can think about who influences them, what matters to them, who kind of influences what they're trying to do. And then I think you also need to think about potentially just maybe how you can kind of be partners in change. And so if you kind of thought about, like, this is the theory of change, we want to try and take this problem on. We know the person that's involved in this, we know their incentives, we know their circle of friends, and we think there's a partnership offer we can have in change. Then you can start to think about, well, how do you deploy your tactics to influence that outcome? And I think for me, I can share with you some toolkits we've done about how to influence change, because it feels like what you're looking for is a political strategy. And you've got all these barriers out here, which is legitimacy, like, well, who are you to say this? Surely there's other people with other opinions. You've got another barrier, which is like voice, like, why should they listen to you? Whatever it might be, or competition. There's lots of other people saying the same thing, so whose voice shouts the loudest? But I feel like in this conversation around what you could do in Canterbury and Kent, if you were to say, this is the problem we're trying to solve, could be as much as, I don't know, getting a university to be net zero by 2025 or 2022. And then you can work your pathway back from there. But I feel like on this conversation in this group, there's some really interesting ways that you can influence change that are super efficient, that won't take you a lot of time, but you've got to understand, what is it you're trying to do? What are those different things that matter to them? And then deploy your tactics to kind of influence that outcome. And that can be, the tactics kind of range depending on what you're trying to do. One is evidence, like, here are some things that people want, let's do this. So that could be a research-based piece. It could be communications, so how do you reach that person? Do they make a difference on things? It could be ongoing advocacy, so you can get support from other people that say, we want you to do this, this, and this. Or there might be other things you could do in other places as well. So really, I think when it comes to how you can be influential, just start with a theory of change, think about what is the problem you're trying to solve, and just work out what are those different kind of things that matter in that space and how you can work against them. I don't know if that was helpful at all, but there's some thoughts on the whiteboard.
That was what I needed. Thank you.
Sorry.
Go on. No, I was just wondering about careers, or do you want to still talk about this stuff?
That's exactly what I was going to ask.
Okay. So how are you feeling about the job market right now? Maybe Tommaso and Emily, you can't answer because you've been the biggest voices. So maybe George or Dahlia or all these other letters I can see at the bottom, but not faces. So RBMBAH, Emmet. MMALUU. What do you guys think?
I mean, obviously things have been put on hold for obvious reasons right now, but I do obviously still have hope on the job market in itself, especially when it comes to such an important subject such as the climate emergency, and especially in the UN, where you have all the countries like going for the same goal because they want it's a global problem, so they want a global solution to, like, they all have to come up with something and they agree on something. So that's why, like, UNEP is so important when it comes to hearing from every country on what they can all do. So that's why we're trying to think from the, I guess, a smaller, what's it called? Like, as in just the university itself and just Canterbury and what we can do, because obviously, like, it is a global problem, but if we do something as a university, it can obviously influence other universities in the UK to do the same things. So what was I was trying to say something and I forgot the ending of my point, but no, I do have hope in the job market. Just right now, we have to finish our degree, and hopefully Corona can go away, so we can actually apply to something next year and, you know, focus on some specialization. And yeah, that's. I don't know if I answered that question, but yeah.
Thanks, Dalia. Great, thank you. Others? Do you know what you want to do? Sorry, go ahead, George.
Yeah, I mean, I think things are pretty much all up in the air quite a lot at the moment, especially in terms of job market. I mean, it seems like, in my personal view, like, my plans change year upon year. At the start of last year, like, my plans were kind of perhaps going abroad and like doing some charity work and such. Like, will I be able to do that next year? Will I be able to, like, will I be allowed to fly abroad? Sorry, everything, like, it's been said today has been good. It just this kind of all links in. I noticed, like, earlier you were talking about the kind of effects that certain initiatives can have on mental health, and how, like, climate change initiatives can blend into that. And I'm thinking, we're talking about the job market, kind of the amount of stress that students are under at the moment, coming out of university, and kind of the plummeting mental health around the current lockdown situation. I was interested in, I thought you perhaps mentioned some initiatives around, like, a more holistic approach to climate change initiatives, and bringing those in, like living healthier and making that more environmentally friendly, but also that having a carry-on effect on the students' mental health. And how, kind of, you said, although there should be kind of a focus of initiatives, how perhaps you can kill two birds, one stone, in that you can have these initiatives which are healthier for the planet and also healthier for the students and the people living in them. And so, yeah, I just wanted to ask kind of what initiatives there are, or if there are any, which kind of combine the two, because it seems like, from what you said, there's a space for that link.
Yeah. Okay, so just, George, just to answer your question, and Dalia, I think yours was more about how you're doing rather than anything specific. But when it comes to mental health, I'm always quite careful about not making climate change a thing around mental health, because then I think it can create an attraction for people to self-identify around, as opposed to just see nature more as a solution rather than like a cost. So particularly climate change, with the fear that we have about what might come next. I don't have a very sophisticated answer on this, but I was really struck by Isabel Hardman, who's a deputy editor of The Spectator, wrote a really good book on the Natural Health Service. And just other things I've read in terms of fiction, non-fiction, about the role and value of nature. At UNEP, we do a lot of work on air quality, which has, like, a profound impact on human health, particularly young people, with NOx and SOx and just the transport systems we have in the world. But in terms of that whole mental health relationship, it's a good question. My mum's a family therapist, my wife's a family therapist, so I should have a really sophisticated answer to this question. And the best I can offer is, and this can sound super glib right now, but I always look for the possibility in everything. I'm never paralyzed by problems, but I see problems as challenges to be overcome. And I always back myself to come up with some way of getting around something, and never feel like it's something that would either hold me back. And I think what I've always thought, both from a work perspective, is to have choices. And the more choices you have, you never feel boxed. And when you feel boxed, that's when you think, Jesus, how am I going to get out of this? So my only tip I have, which is kind of crappy, but just try and find pathways out, and always have people that you can go to, that you trust, that will support you, that you can be vulnerable with, that you can open up to. So then you can let go of things in a safe space and then kind of recalibrate and come back. And so I think when it comes to mental health, I haven't seen something on the shelf that makes sense to me yet. And I'm just nervous just seeing how everyone wants to medicate a problem or to have a label for a problem. I just think labels are harmful rather than helpful sometimes if we're not careful. So I don't want to put them out there, and I just want to give positive choices about possibility rather than negative choices around labels, perhaps. So there's just my unvarnished, unsophisticated wisdom. On careers, my truth on this, which is only ever going to be like an evidence base of one, so super unscientific. But I left university having no idea about what I wanted to do. And I kind of scraped through with a 2-1, which I think was good enough. And a friend of mine went to Namibia as a teacher, and I just wrote to the school saying, can I do what my friend did? And they said yes. And so I taught in a school in front of 35 kids with no educational background. And so that pushing myself into environments that are fairly fear-based, running a boys' hostel with 90 kids, most of them are quite complicated, but just throwing yourself into a deep end and seeing if you can swim gives you life skills that you can come back to. So I'm now never intimidated by what I don't know or those kind of environments. And then I said to myself, I chose organizations that I think I could benefit from working in, or I admired or I respected. So I wanted to work for Oxfam because I thought Save the Kids was just children. Some of them were quite religious, which didn't speak to me. And I really liked the heritage of Oxfam about what it did in Cambodia, and that spoke to me as well. So I spent 10 years as head of press there, and I did some remarkable work in that organisation, and I still have a lot of time for it. I then went to go and work with something called One Goal, which was with Gordon Brown, a FIFA legacy campaign for the World Cup, and I thought I can go to South Africa and watch a little World Cup, which was fine, because I quite like football. And that gave me an opportunity to work with ministers of state to see how I can kind of shift different things in that space. And then I worked for Avaz, the campaign organisation, to see how you can mobilise, which is now 55 million people, to get involved in online digital campaigning and influence change by rapid fire, agile, moving people around problems and seeing how you can deploy. Then I chose the United Nations mainly because I loved Dag Hammarskjöld and what he stood for, and what he was about in the 1950s. And what the UN was and what the UN can become. And I chose that mainly because the UN is only as good as the people that work for it. And I just wanted to see what was possible there. So when it comes to careers, you can have 50 different careers in your lifetime. We're going to have to work until we're 75, which is like 53 years of labour, if not 54. But work is the most enjoyable thing you'll probably do in your week if you find the job that you're passionate about. And I think it's that search for purpose. And what's really good now is there is an alignment with the private sector with purpose, which I think is positive, not just profit. And so there's a triple bottom line, which I think is interesting. And working in organisations that you think you admire and you're prepared to commit to, I think matters. And then I think the other thing I'd just say is just the role of my parents. Like, my mum and dad have always said to me, there's nothing you can't do. And I think, like, I was the only kid to go to university, the first one from our generation, and just like very boring suburban upbringing in Watford, just north of London. And so there's just something for me about, we forget how remarkable we are. And sometimes we focus on our cracks rather than just thinking about how good we can be. And so I would just say the best career advice is just think about, dream big about who you want to work for and why. When anyone ever says to me, I want to come and work for you, and because I want to do this, and the reason I want to do this is because this, I will always give them an interview and I'll think very deeply about who they are and what they're about. And so there's something about the tenacity of the pursuit of the dream that I think really speaks a lot to people. And you'll just think, well, man, they'll never get back to me. Why don't I even write an email to them? But I think in a way, the more you can use your heart to connect to people and see what they say, I think that can open things up. So I don't know if any of that makes sense. It's kind of like a jumble of who I am and how I've ended up, and my pathway will be different to lots of other pathways. But my takeaway is, I would say, think about your dream organisation or role. Try lots of different things. Sometimes jobs are stepping stone jobs or bridges to the next thing, and just build you skills. And tenacity is everything. And you just got to fight for stuff and say, okay, I really want to come and work for this, this, or this, and this is the reason why. And it might be the person says, you can't do this because you need to do X, Y, and Z. And you go, okay, that's good feedback. So maybe your tenacity comes with feedback as to what is the gap that you need to fill. So you're just thinking through, not just, I would like to come and work for you, but I would like to come work for you. But if you don't think I'm not ready yet, I'd really love to hear what you think I should do that would make me ready in 2 years' time. So in a way, that in a way just makes it very hard for them not to engage with you, because you've kind of placed a bit of a crackerjack on them when they think, oh shit, okay, I should do something about this. So yeah, the monologue over on careers. Questions? Emily and Tommaso, I'm going to give you permission to speak because nobody else wants to. So anything you want to say?
I mean, no, that was very, very helpful, and sort of contextualizes, I think, a lot of things for a lot of us. I mean, we're now getting close to the end of the hour. I don't know if there were any other sort of last thoughts or questions we missed that you wanted to leave us with.
I don't know. I mean, I would just. I feel like the fact you're having this conversation, I don't think I was doing this. I mean, how old are you all? Are you postgrads or undergrads? Where are you at?
Undergrads.
Undergrads. I mean, I wasn't even thinking like this as an undergrad. So the fact you're having this conversation, I think, says a lot about you. I would just, my take on this is, I'd just say be excited about life. Because I think life is amazing, and the lives and the careers that you're going to go and have in this transition period are going to be phenomenal. I feel like with the Biden administration, what's going to come next, with climate change being a foreign and domestic policy, I think is great. I think the European Union, what they're trying to do with the Green New Deal is phenomenal. And then just BlackRock, what they announced yesterday with Think, saying we want to make this something where we will change boards on. They've already sent out a warning to 192 boards of fairly large blue chip companies. Unless you do this, we're going to move you. So I think the power that you have to really make the world the one we want it to be is unprecedented. And I'm excited about the next decade. I think there's going to be some stuff that we rough, and I think we've boxed ourselves in a bit. But if we come at things with hope and possibility, then that's contagious. And I feel like seeing the problems in things just makes people just say, why should we bother? So I just think positive mental attitude, come at things with love and hope and possibility, and then that will spread, and then you'll grow crowds around you as well. So that's my take. But again, it's personal to me, and it needs to be authentic to you, as opposed to you dialing in stuff that just doesn't feel like who you really are. So again, authenticity matters, and it's what your voice is and what you're trying to do. Great. I really enjoyed this. I didn't know what to expect of this. I was being like, Karina, what do you want me to do? And so then Karina wrote to Emily this morning and just asked. And I think having small conversations like this, I really enjoyed, just from self-reflection and just thinking about my journey, my wisdom, and I just hope it's been useful for you. And I'm pretty crap on email, so feel free to send, but don't be offended if I don't reply. But if there's something that comes back to you that says, we've had a chat off the back of this and we're wondering about this, or this, then I'll do my best to get back to you. But thank you and good luck, and really nice to see you all. And I hope everything's okay with you in Kent and Canterbury. I know how rough it is, so wishing you all well.
Thank you so much. And I think this has been a very inspiring conversation. So thank you for all your time.
No, pleasure. Nice to see you all. Look after yourselves.
Thank you.
Cheers. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.